Wash your hands regularly or apply hand sanitizer frequently and keep a safe distance. All crews and talents involved in this program have followed strict health protocols and obtained negative COVID-19 test results. Before the event starts, I would like to invite you to be seated. You may find our ushers are ready to guide you to your seating. Your cooperation is appreciated.
Jakarta Investment Center has served more than 50 project facilitations, ranging from infrastructure, transportation, water management, and environmental sector. Through a one-stop integrated services, we provide easier permit and licensing application for you to grow your business. Jakarta Investment Center is ready to serve you in making your investment process hassle-free.
As the largest metropolitan region in the Southern Hemisphere, Jakarta is and will remain as Indonesia's economic powerhouse. With a suite of professionals from multiple levels of Jakarta's provincial government, the Jakarta Investment Committee specializes in formulating policy solutions that are genuinely win-win for all stakeholders.
Jakarta Investment Center and Jakarta Investment Committee were established by the Jakarta Capital City Government together with Bank Indonesia as a regional investor relation unit. We strive to actively communicate regional economic policy and address the concern of investors, especially in terms of financial and investment climate. Together, we are committed to optimize investment growth across Jakarta. And we are excited to do more.
By working together with you
in building a better Jakarta. Come and grow with Jakarta.
Invest now, invest Jakarta.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Faila Sufa and I will be a moderator for these sessions. So we've seen a glimpse of how Jakarta has been actively promoting green investment initiative in Jakarta through Jakarta Investment Center and Komite Investasi Jakarta. Jakarta Investment Center and Komite Investasi Jakarta strong effort has resulted in numerous collaboration with global counterparts. Jakarta Investment Center and Komite Investasi Jakarta are ready to serve you, potential investor, in making your investment process hassle-free. And today for these sessions, we will have 4 distinguished speakers. I would like to invite them to join me on the stage. First, I would like to invite Mr. Oni Wijanarko, Executive Director of Bank Indonesia DKI Jakarta Representative Office. Mr. Oni Wijanarko is Chief Executive Representative of Bank Indonesia Office in DKI Jakarta Province. He was the Head of Communications and Head of Payment System Policy of Bank Indonesia. Previously, he had served as the assistant to the Vice President of Republic of Indonesia, Vice President and as assistant to the Governor of Bank Indonesia. Pak Oni. And the second speaker, he will join us online. Mr. Richard Michael, he is Country Director of UK Export Finance in Indonesia. Richard Michael is Country Head Indonesia for UK Export Finance. He has worked in Asia Pacific for over 30 years, mainly in infrastructure project financing for a variety of commercial banks. He has lived and worked in Indonesia for more than half that time. And then prior to joining the UKEF, he worked at Indonesia Infrastructure Finance. Mr. Richard Michael will join us online. And then our third speaker, Mr. David Donovan. He is a senior investment specialist within the private sector department for Asian Development Bank, ADB. He is based in Jakarta and covers a number of sectors in the infrastructure space, including energy, transport, water, and telcos. Prior to the ADB, he worked in a number of commercial and investment banks covering infrastructure in the Asia Pacific region. Mr. David, please come on stage. And And then our last distinguished speaker is Mr. Gary Howard, Divisional Director, Transport Sector Lead, Southeast Asia of Mott MacDonald. Mr. Gary is Transport Sector Lead Southeast Asia for Mott MacDonald. He has worked for the company for more than 5 years, including extensive aviation experience in all disciplines of airport, such as technical and financial due diligence, airport operations, planning, design, and construction. He has an international experience working in Australia, Indonesia, US, UK, and Europe, and currently he's based in Singapore. He's currently leading the Mott MacDonald Terminal 5 Changi Master Building Consultancy Team as Project Director. Mr. Gary, please come on stage. Indonesia infrastructure development remains a priority, with transportation infrastructure is one of the national strategic and priority projects, including those in Jakarta as well as potential development in the new capital Nusantara. Financing a sustainable infrastructure can be the key to future prosperity. Financing a multi-billion-dollar infrastructure project is complicated, as it may require loans from banks, equity from investors, and guarantees from the government. Although a number of financing mechanisms are now available for infrastructure projects, and it doesn't necessarily rely on one source of the state financial capacity. And in our discussion today, we will hear from these financing experts about the investment climate, as well as how this help accelerate infrastructure financing that mostly will not rely solely on the government budget. And we will start this session with presentation for each panelist. So each panelist will have 10 minutes for their presentations. We will start with first speaker, Pak Oni Wijanarko. He will present about Jakarta's investment climate and wider economic development in regards to infrastructure financing. Pak Oni, please, the time is yours.
Honorable Assistant to Provincial Secretary of Economy and Finance, Ibu Sri Hardati, and then My Excellency Ambassador of United Kingdom to Indonesia, Mr. Owen Jenskin, or who represent him, and distinguished speaker and participant. We have the expert here, Mr. Richard Michael, Country Director of UK Export Finance in Indonesia, Mr. David Dovan, Investment Specialist Infrastructure Finance of Asian Development Banks, Mr. Gary Howard, Division Director, Transport Sector Lead, Southeast Asia, Mott and MacDonald, and ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much for inviting me. It is a great pleasure to be part of this side panel session this evening. And thanks for the British Embassy who initiate this event. And let me start with global economy in a brief, and then Indonesian economy prospect, Jakarta economy prospect, and then come to the investment. So, as you know, the global economy is expected to grow more slowly than previous projected. In this slide, you can see all, and accompanied by the increasing risk of stagflation, indicated by economic growth in several countries, including the United States, in China is potentially lower than previously projected, coupled with the growing risk of stagflation in several jurisdictions and even recessions in several advanced economies in response to the aggressive tightening monetary policy and geopolitical event in the world, like Ukraine and Russia. And we are facing what we call the food crisis and commodity crisis that all will give an impact the all economic activity. And as you know, the various early indicator in August 2022 pointed to aggressive moderating consumption and manufacturing performance in United States, Europe, and China is getting lower and lower. And meanwhile, the heightened global inflationary pressures persist given ongoing geopolitical tensions and inward-looking policies accompanied by limited improvement in terms of the supply chains disruption. And world trade volume is also forecast below the previous projection in line with the global economic moderation. Consequently, the global economic growth projection in 2022 has been revised down from 3.5% to 2.9%. And then at home in Indonesia, the domestic economic improvement remain intact despite the impact of the global economic moderation, demanding careful vigilance. And the gross domestic product in the second quarter of 2022 grew 5.44% year-on-year, significantly above the first quarter at 5.01% year-on-year. And the strong national economic growth is driven by increasing domestic demand, particularly household consumption and investment, and then also persistently solid export performance. And national economic improvement is also reflected in stronger growth of main economic sector, led by the wholesale and retail trade, manufacturing industry, as well as mining and excavation. Several early indicators in August 2022 and the latest surveys conducted by Bank Indonesia continue to point to further improvement. Externally, export performance as of July 2022 remained in the positive territory despite the global economic slowdown. Consequently, economic growth in 2022 is projected to be biased toward the upper bound of Bank Indonesia range projection between 4.5% to 5.3%. And consistent with the national recovery, Jakarta economic itself, in the second quarter of 2022 was strong, achieved at 5.59% above the national growth year-on-year. Thus maintaining the recovery momentum from the previous quarter that was recorded at 4.62% year-on-year. And such development were primarily explained by the increasing household consumption and investment, as well as maintain the export performance, given the greater community mobility in Jakarta and the solid demand in Jakarta's major trading partners. Most economic sectors are also contributing to Jakarta economic growth, including wholesale and retail trade, information and communication, as well as construction in Jakarta. And various early indicators in August 2022 and the latest survey conducted by us continue to point the further improvement. And Jakarta economic growth for this year is expected within Bank Indonesia projection of 5.3% to 6.1%, above the national projection growth. We are recorded, top 5 economy sector has been supporting Jakarta growth, and top 4 potential economic sector also supporting Jakarta growth. As you can see from the slide, I will not explain one by one because I consider the time constraint in this presentation, which is aiming toward the digital and sustainable economy in line with national agenda. And next slide. Another good news was in end of June this year. The Fitch rating affirmed Indonesia rating at BBB with the stable outlook, and GCRA rated us several months ago BBB+. That shows the strong confidence from international rating standard on the Indonesia maintains macroeconomic stability and medium-term economic prospect. Moreover, the perception of the risk investing in Indonesia is improving, as indicated by the decline in the value of Indonesia CDS, credit default swap, in the last 5 years, as shown in the slide. The conducive domestic investment climate support foreign direct investment growth in FDI in this country in the first semester 2022 grew 38.2% year-on-year, higher than previous semester of 34.06% year-on-year, and is dominated by sectors, forestry, fishing, and mining sector. Consistent with that, foreign direct investment in Jakarta in the first semester of this year also grew 6.64% year-on-year. And FDI of the Jakarta is dominated by the housing, industrial estates, office sector, hotel and restaurant sectors, as well as trade and repair sectors. Given the importance in the investment in the economy, in 2022, the green investment is a priority theme in investment promotion program, including various international forums, one of which is the series of G20 activity. Today, we are implementing Jakarta Investment Forum with the team investing in resilience. And this evening, we talk about the funding structure. And I'm lucky because I'm not expert on that, but we have the expert in front of us that later can share with us. As you can see from the slide, for example, the 15 projects in Jakarta offered in this event are not only as the growing and developing projects, but also a trending projects that support environmental issues and sustainable economic growth, such as the low carbon transport, transit-oriented development, sustainable waste management, renewable energy, tourism, and real estate. We believe investing in these 15 potential projects will encourage the transformation of Jakarta as a city, as a greener and livable city. Data shown that FDI in renewable projects are increasing, and the larger fossil energy projects is decreasing. And that show to us that the 15 projects offered by the Jakarta Investment Committee is the promising project in the future. Then this one, I'm not the expert, but I want to show the framework that we draw how to discover the infrastructure financing alternative. As you see, in order to encourage strong and balanced, inclusive and sustainable economic growth, we need a massive infrastructure development. But that is required the financing. However, the financing in the infrastructure sector is require a large amount and also the long-term financing. In addition, there are other issues or constraints, whereas the government fiscal capacity and the banking capacity are limited to provide the infrastructure financing amidst low domestic private sector involvement because need the large amount is long-term financing. Therefore, infrastructure financing can be achieved through collaboration, we expect, such as the public and private partnership and external funding. Generally, the opportunity to obtain financing with the PPP schemes and external funding is the greater if the infrastructure project is profitable, the project is the high IRR, the surrounding, the ecosystem support, the investor coming to see the project and to invest the project. I think that is the specific issues in the investment. And to strengthen this, capacity building is needed in the form of financial instrument innovation, formulation of fiscal incentive policies, coordination between institutions related to project development in accordance with regional development, as well as strengthening PPP project data and information. And the last slide. The time is up, yeah? Yes. I think I will not explain the slide. I will end the slide and thank you for attention. Thank you.
Global economy and global GDP growth, including in Indonesia and also in Jakarta, and then foreign direct investment in Indonesia and also in Jakarta's growth, and also list of projects that also support the government, the green environment, and also the infrastructure financing alternatives. So I will next invite the second speaker. He will present online, Mr. Richard Michael, Country Director of UK Export Finance in Indonesia. So he will present about export credit role to finance urban infrastructure project. Richard, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be with you, although I'm not here in person, and I'm sorry that I can't be there, but there are plenty of my colleagues from the British Embassy, Jakarta, in the audience, and you can connect with them after the presentation. So the first slide, please. Next. So UK Export Finance is actually the official export credit agency of the British government. We are in fact the oldest export credit agency in the world, founded over 100 years ago. But we are young at heart. We have a reputation as being one of the most innovative ECAs and very flexible in our support. And I'll be able to demonstrate that in the following slides. In terms of sustainable lending, and you can see I'm wearing green today, we provided 3.6 billion in support in the last year. And actually that placed us #1 amongst all the ECAs globally, excuse me, in terms of sustainable lending. So we're very proud of that. But of course we want to do more, and we want to do more in Indonesia, of course, as well. Next slide. So last year we provided a total of £7.4 billion globally in support of UK exports, supporting 545 UK companies, and the majority of those were actually SMEs. So 81% of the companies were actually SMEs. So we're not just supporting the big UK exporters. We support any UK company that is involved in exports to Indonesia. Next, please. So a bit more detail on what we do. In Indonesia, we have a limit of £4 billion, which I suppose is about 80 trillion rupiah. It's a lot of money, but actually there are a lot of projects as well. So we're going to have to manage that, but it's a good problem to have. we are able to provide financing in local currencies. That means we can do an Indonesian rupiah guarantee to a local bank. And I think we're one of the few ECAs that can actually do that. And of course, it makes sense for projects where the revenues are in rupiah and there's no indexation to the US dollar. So that obviously includes projects like water, roads, and other projects as well, maybe some smaller power projects. And the country representative based in Jakarta, that's me. We actually set up in Jakarta. That was the first country in the world that UK Export Finance established itself in. Now we have, I think, 20 countries, but we did choose Indonesia as being the first to put somebody on the ground. So we cover a number of sectors. Obviously, the focus today is on infrastructure, mainly transportation infrastructure, but we are covering renewable energy, airports, healthcare, agriculture, as well as many other sectors as well, including defense, for example. And what we essentially do is we provide long-term funding to the buyers of UK goods and services. So we provide a guarantee normally to a bank, and then we take all the risk away from that bank so that they are getting a UK government guarantee. And we sometimes lend direct without having a bank in between, and that is usually at fixed rates of interest. And we have some capacity that is actually set aside for clean growth. So currently about £2 billion is available to support green growth projects, clean growth projects rather. Next, please. This is the typical structure of how the buyer finance works. We have buyer credit in blue on the left, standard bank buyer loan guarantee, which is actually for the smaller transactions, which is more standardized. And then, as I mentioned, the direct lending. And we give that guarantee to a bank who enters into a loan with the buyer, and then the exporter gets paid by the buyer under the normal terms of its contract commercially, so that they know they're going to get paid, and then the loan is used to make that payment. Next, please. This is a bit more of a complex slide, so I apologize for that in advance, but I thought it was important to show that we're not necessarily proposing a one-size-fits-all solution for Indonesia. We're not saying that you have to take everything from the UK in order to get our financing. And this is just an example of a project of £100 million, or $100 million rather, and showing that we can support up to 81 million out of that 100 billion, even though you can see on the bottom left that there's actually only 20 million UK content. And I've included Japan as just an example of a third country. It doesn't have to be Japan. But so we can actually, in theory, finance other countries' exports as well. Plus, and I think this is quite important to emphasize in infrastructure projects, the local content as well can be supported. So that can be up to 50% of the total of the exports. So you see in this case, we can actually offer 30 million local content compared with the 60 million of exports. So that gives you a total of 81 million, which supports the UK, Japan, and Indonesian content in the same project. So I think that's quite important to understand, because we know, and I won't mention the specific examples necessarily today, but we know that in the past, some infrastructure has been provided by certain countries, and they insist on everything coming from that country. We have a much different approach. We feel that we should concentrate on the areas where we add value, and that then give the flexibility to the buyer to then choose which party they will work with in terms of local content or other exporters. Next, please. And this is a typical structure, a very simple diagram. It just shows you that there is obviously a project SPV in the middle. So this can be for guaranteed financing by the government, could also be for a PPP project, or just pure project finance, where the project SPV is taking the risk on the revenues of the project. The finance parties can be a combination of export credit agencies like UK Export Finance, MLAs like Asian Development Bank, who are here today, commercial banks as well. And in this sort of infrastructure project, where we're talking about big rail, for example, or electric vehicles for Trans-Jakarta. Normally, we would expect there to be some form of central government support via the MOF and potentially IIGF as well. And of course, the sponsors of the project can be BUMD, they can be BUMN or private sector. And the EPC contract, as I said before, it doesn't have to be all UK. It can actually be combination with local and other countries as well. Next slide, please. So what is our UKEF value proposition? Our guarantee is actually for 100% of the risk that the bank is taking. Actually, in some cases, other ECAs don't cover 100%. They can cover 90 or 95%. So ours is actually very strong in that sense. For renewable energy, for example, we can give 18 years repayment on top of the delivery period. We can lend in rupiah, as I mentioned. We are very flexible. The minimum UK content of only 20%. We obviously want it to be higher, and usually we find that we start with 20%, but actually it ends up being higher once the buyer realizes the value added from the UK. Next, please. We provide support of 85% of the contract value. That is actually temporarily 95% for the government. They have until 4 November to be able to take advantage of that. So the pressure is on. Local costs, as I said, are covered. And the interest rate on the loan will reflect the fact that they're getting a UK government guarantee, which is currently AA rated. Next, please. So a couple of case studies, which I think could apply to Indonesia. One is very recent, the Ankara-Izmir Railway in Turkey, a buy credit of 2.1 billion euro. And it was actually the biggest ever sustainable civil infrastructure deal that we had done. And we worked with other banks as well as ECAs. Next, please. And also in Cairo, Egypt, a monorail project with UKEF cover as well. And with the bank we were working with was JP Morgan, and other ECAs again were involved. So you can see from those two examples that, and next please, you can see from those two examples that the structure is multi-source. It's not just from UK Export Finance. We work with other ECAs as well as with commercial banks. And in both of these cases, the projects actually benefited from central government support. They weren't PPPs. Actually, I think in both cases, they were looking at the PPP structure as an option, but they realized it was going to take too long, be too expensive, and not deliver necessarily the value for money that was being sought by the government. So both of them ended up having sovereign guarantees. So this is something which I think is quite applicable in the Indonesian market for some of the larger scale projects that we're looking at. I think there's one more slide, maybe. Yeah, and that just shows you the structure in that case. And then the last slide. So thank you very much. That shows you how to contact me if you have any questions. And of course, you can find out my details also through my colleagues who are in the audience. So thank you very much.
For share with us the export credit rules to give long-term financing and guarantees, and also multi-sourcing structures, and also the example of project finance structure with the formulation of project SPV, and also case studies from several countries around the world. And we'll have the third speakers, Mr. David Dovan, Investment Specialist Infrastructure Finance of Asian Development Bank. He will present about the ADB's role to finance urban infrastructure project.
Thank you for having me speak today. My name is David Dovan. I've been with ADB for almost 5 years now. Prior to that, I was working with 3 or 4 commercial banks in Hong Kong covering Asia Pacific. So just the first slide introducing ADB. We cover a number of countries all the way west to Georgia and as far as east as Fiji. and we specifically only cover developing countries. So the developed countries like Singapore, Hong Kong, Korea, and Japan are not places that we operate in. We're headquartered in Manila and have more than 3,500 employees and have been around for more than 50 years. Just a little bit about ADB and Indonesia. As you can see, Indonesia is the 6th largest shareholder of ADB with, can we go back, please? Yep, the 6th largest shareholder with 5.4%, behind the leading countries of Japan and USA. In this country, we've lent up to $45 billion already among 820 loans. And last year in 2021, we had a $1 billion support for COVID response to the country, as well as a $450 million loan to PT Bio Farma to help them support safe and efficient deliveries of COVID vaccines. Out of all the countries that are borrowing with ADB, Indonesia is easily in the top 5 of borrowing countries behind the leaders of China and India. Next slide, please. Great. If you look at ADB, there's basically 2 departments. I am from the private sector department, and there's another larger department called the sovereign department. Typically, when the sovereign department lends to a borrower, that borrower is effectively guaranteeing the loan by the sovereign. So for example, in this case in Indonesia, it's the Ministry of Finance Department, MOF. One key mandate for the private sector is to ensure that there's as much commercial co-financing as possible. We want to leverage our money to ensure that the private sector participates in all of our transactions. Next slide, please. Okay. So just an example of a sovereign project. One of my colleagues did this a few years ago. It closed in 2014, and it's a loan for $120 million, hopefully to be done by 2023. Of course, with many projects, COVID has delayed a lot of them. The actual borrower is actually the Ministry of Finance, and the executive agency is the Ministry of Public Works and Housing. So in terms of the purpose of the loan, the cities of Jambi, Makassar, and Pekanbaru will all have construction of a sewage network as well as a water treatment plant. Next slide, please. Here in the private sector for Indonesia, we have been very active in the energy IPP sector, but yet to have done a urban project, and we look forward to the first one, to do one in Jakarta. So as an example, we want to show you something we did in Thailand. So it's called the pink and yellow MRT lines. Next slide, please. As you can see, the network in Bangkok is already very extensive. So the yellow line and the pink line are just supplements to the existing network. You're looking at 30 to 35 kilometers of network for them. Now, originally scheduled to be completed by 2021, again, COVID has delayed the project and is hoping by early of next year, some of the stations will be operating, but fully operational by Q3 of 2023. Next slide, please. Just recently, some of my colleagues in the Bangkok office, they went to the site visit to see the latest progress, and this is some examples, some photos of the pink line. Next slide, please. Okay, some information about the project. It's a very, very big project. It's about $3 billion in CapEx. It is supported by $1.5 billion of government subsidies to be paid over 10 years. Particularly, it's very important that in the early years of a line where there's a ramp up, that these subsidies happen. Of course, with large CapEx is long-term funding. So the CapEx was funded 70% debt, 30% equity. You have a very strong sponsorship group. You have RECH, the leading IPP player in Thailand. You have BTS, a leading operator of mass transit systems in Bangkok. and a very strong engineering construction company in Sinotype. A very important part of the financing is the fact it's long-term. The concession period is 33 years, so it's long-term Thai baht financing over around between 18 to 20 years. In this particular case, ADB's tenor loan was actually 2 years longer than the loan of the commercial Thai banks by 2 years. This is quite important because the project then can manage the early issues with cash flow at the start and use our 20-year loan as an advantage. Next slide, please. So maybe just talk about the value addition, not just for this particular project, but anywhere. For large projects that are very important for the economy, we can support with large debt packages. So for example, for this one, it was close to $312 million US equivalent in Thai baht. Most recently, in an IPP in Indonesia, we also lent around $305 million in hard currency. I think this is quite important. I think in developing countries where the commercial banking market is not that so developed, having ADB there is a very strong signal that it's bankable. And it gives all the commercial banks some confidence that they can lend alongside us and basically participate in a very strong project. This is also very important. The third one is very important in terms of developed countries that we have long-term currency financing. So in this case, in the MRT project, we had long-term Thai baht financing. In Indonesia, we also have long-term rupiah capability. We can go up to 20 years rupiah fixed interest rates. So that is one of our capabilities that we can offer Indonesia. And again, finally, ADB is in a position to take risks that are a lot greater than some of the commercial banks might be comfortable in taking. So in this case, we offered a longer tenor, so the project can basically use that to mitigate cash flow and ridership risk at the very start of the project. So that finishes my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David, for sharing the ADB's role to finance urban infrastructure, including the ADB's project examples and ADB value additions. Our last but not least speakers, I would like to invite Mr. Gary Howard, the Divisional Director, Transport Sector Lead Southeast Asia of McDonald. He will present about financing infrastructure projects from consultancy perspective.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be here today to present to you, and along with my esteemed guests, side speakers. Okay, before I go into project delivery, I just want to probably just do a little background on McDonald and who we are. So we're a global engineering, management, and development consultancy, and we're focused on guiding our clients through many of the planet's most intricate challenges. We're a wholly owned company, staff-owned company, and we're very proud of that, and I think that gives us a different approach to how we deliver projects. Indonesia. McDonald first came to Indonesia in 1969 to work on the British Age project, the Kali Progo irrigation rehabilitation project across Java and South Sumatra. We delivered some of the country's most significant projects, rebuilding tsunami-devastated Aceh, improving sanitation facilities for 100,000 people, and helping Jakarta develop its modern metro. We're also supporting Indonesia to harvest its resource of clean energy, which contributes to meet its commitment under the Paris Climate Agreement. In addition to this, we're also the appointed delivery partner for the Global Future Cities program, which aims to help reduce poverty, increase economic development, and improve the citizens' quality of life across 19 cities in South America, Africa, Europe, Malaysia, Myanmar, Philippines, Thailand, Vietnam, and of course here in Indonesia, where we've targeted 3 projects. In Singapore, we've also been established for over 50 years. We've now designed over 30% of the Singapore metro infrastructure. We're also currently designing a world-first 6-lane underground highway, which is integrated into a bus lane and cycle path. The image that you can see on the side was recently released in the Straits Times, is Changi Terminal 5, obviously a mega project which has taken a lot of notice in the public domain. As McDonald, we're one of 3 JV partners delivering the design from concept through detailed design, aura, and handover. Sorry, next slide. In Australia, we are in involved in every major rail program and act as the integrated partner for Sydney Metro's EDA program. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, integrated delivery partner. Now that we've given you some background on what we do, briefly I know, but that's really to set the scene. We've been involved as a global company in massive, huge major projects around the world, delivering huge infrastructure projects. And we've also want to deliver better and smarter. So we work collaboratively with clients to identify desired outcomes across all facets of the program, delivering tailored, integrated approach to project delivery. We've been an integral member providing global thought leadership for the Project 13 Enterprise Initiative, which we have also complemented with the Infrastructure Australia Delivery Outcome Approach. And through this, we've developed what we are now terming our Integrated Delivery Partner Approach. In short, what we are trying to achieve is a scalable, adaptive, and integrated approach to major program delivery, a model that is applicable to all sectors and industries and across all major program delivery, a model that enables us to work with the client to achieve their specified and integrated focus areas and outcomes. Next slide, please. So we listen to our clients. There's a couple of statements here, one from World Economic Forum and another one from Colin Murray from Australia Infrastructure. The reality is today's major infrastructure programs need smart strategies and need smart focus. We've considered these challenges carefully, and as a key contributor to the global thought leadership, practical application of the Enterprise 13 initiative, we have leveraged our experience within this and within our thought leadership groups to develop a flexible and adaptive integrated model for all major projects. We're acutely aware of the client's big picture challenges and perspective. There are numerous major transport infrastructure programs in Southeast Asia and globally, leading to tension between finite resources with increasing prices and pressure to achieve more with less. We understand that our clients are looking to achieve better economic development, better social and environmental outcomes, better businesses, better return on your investment, and improvement is at the heart of the transformational approach that we have adopted. Next slide, please. I don't want you to read too much on this slide. This is really to just make your thoughts. Every major program has these same challenges. Where do we get the right people with the right skills? How do we afford this mega project? What's the right type of systems thinking and approach that we can bring to this project? We're in a digital society now. We're delivering with much more digital capability, but how do we apply that digital technology to get the best impact from our projects? Indonesia has performed incredibly well, and we can already see the fruits of the infrastructure investment with the MRT, LRT, and high-speed rail programs. However, it will still require a breakthrough, a real breakthrough, to achieve Indonesia's ambitious infrastructure program, both in terms of schemes to finance the project, delivery to budget, and providing the local capacity building. Capacity building in project preparation and procurement add a new emphasis on funding, training, and motivating talented people to manage projects. Major projects require agile frameworks to manage and respond to multi-stakeholder environments to attract the world's leading investors, talent, and international contractors. Within Mott MacDonald, we've leveraged this experience to develop our integrated delivery partner model, which is a flexible and adaptable integrated model for all major projects, with the key principles being to provide a to understand and acknowledge a transformational change is needed in how we plan and deliver infrastructure. This change must focus on delivering better outcomes for government, community, and business through more productive, innovative, sustainable infrastructure sector, greater certainty, productivity, performance, and value in delivery of operation, and a more sustainable, innovative, highly skilled industry. Next slide, please. Setting up a project for success is a formidable task, and is more daunting without the specialist expertise and hands-on experience of running major programs. Trends in mega projects, and specifically rail projects, worldwide show that an average schedule overrun of 45% and an average cost overrun of 45%. Construction now achieves less added value per hour work than we achieved in 1947. At Mott MacDonald, we're working in an alliance with Octane AI and the Oxford University Major Program Team, where we have developed an AI program that can help track and forecast overspend on mega projects and schedule difficulties some 8 to 12 months ahead, with a 98% accuracy ahead of traditional PPCM expertise, thus enabling early decision-making to arrest these issues. However, setting up a project for success can only be achieved through the early stage strategic decision-making at an enterprise level. Next slide, please. Another infographic, but really what we're trying to show here, if you look on the bottom left graphic, is the nature of the relationship, from tactical through important to collaborative to strategic. The integrated model that we're talking about is a strategic model. It's there to help build capacity. The core objective of an integrated delivery partner are to provide a strategic portfolio perspective with the aim of assisting government and agencies and special purpose vehicles build essential capacity and capability within their own organizations and across industry supply chains. Relentless focus on outcomes with demand-led strategies, seeking to identify opportunities to de-risk programs at an early stage. Develop early planning and strategy development to assure deliverability and avoid exceeding the capacity of the client's organization or the capacity of the market. The nature of the relationship is one of a long-term strategic partner, enabling transformational change to our clients through expert domain knowledge honed on major infrastructure projects across the globe. Next slide, please. So, I think I'm running out of time, so we'll skip this slide and I'll come on to the next slide. Sorry. Go forward one more slide. Okay, we can stay here. So this gives us a view really of ultimately the benefit to the client and to the organization as anything. Ultimately, the agile and flexible integrated delivery partner approach is about delivering benefits, organizational development, define the strategy to develop and build your organization's capacity, assess existing structure and capability, design the building blocks and additional capacity required through the development of strategic operation model, knowledge transfer, leadership development, training, action learning, shadowing, ultimately build the client's maturity and ensure a lasting legacy of capability. In the supply chain, de-risking delivery is vital and one of the major contributors to a lack of supply chain shortfalls in project critical capabilities in both developed and developing countries are key contributors to delivery risk. Program definition. Designing a program in trenches to de-risk delivery and match the market appetite for risk are all critical. Just one last slide, and then I think we'll forward one slide. I think we've gone too far. Okay, so I'll talk about this, I think, later on because I've run out of time, but there's a series of case studies I think we can address in the Q&A. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Gary, for sharing several projects from McDonald's around the world. And now we come for panel discussion and also Q&A. The first question, so for the audience, please prepare your questions. You will have time to ask the panelists here. I would ask Pak Oni, I saw from your presentation there is growth in Indonesia and also in Jakarta. So I'm curious that what are the regulations that has been issued by the government to smoothen the financing of green infrastructure project in Indonesia, especially in Jakarta? And then the other question is, how far can Bank Indonesia interfere with commercial banks in order to reduce the interest rate of infrastructure financing? We know that currently the interest rate for infrastructure is about 10 to 11%, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, there's two questions for me.
Thank you. Farah.
File,
thank you. Thank you for your question. Maybe I will explain how Bank Indonesia support the investment in Indonesia through their policy and regulation. We have policy and regulation, for example, to support the green financing. We already launched the regulation, I think, years ago, loan to value ratio. So everybody who buy the electric vehicle, the down payment is lower than required by uh, uh, the banks. And the second, we collaborate with the ministerial departments. We issue sukuk, and some green financing sukuk, and we have the road show around the globe to offer the project. For example, PRI, for example, already launched the green financing through sukuk, I think supported by ADB, if I'm not mistaken, or the World Bank. Amount almost the 50 BU dollars. So that is the form of support by Bank Indonesia. Second, we have the obligation to promote the investment, Indonesian investment to around the globe. For example, we have the investor relation unit, and we have the 5 representative office in abroad, in London, New York, Singapore, Beijing, and Tokyo, to promote all strategic project that is clean and clear, and offer all the project and facilitate the business matching between the respected countries and the owner of the projects in Indonesia. And we know we still make effort for formulate the regulation which fit to the long-term financing. And for example, to issue the government bond, we have the limitation because the accountability to resolve the debt is only 5 years, while the project financing for the infrastructure is the long-term, like already explained by David and Kerry. And that is the sum of our support in to grow the investment in Indonesia.
Thank you, Pak. Next for Richard, I know that UKEF now is planning to have a collaboration with Jakarta. Actually, I'm curious, what is the main challenging that usually faced by the UKEF to have a collaborations with both private sector and also government sector in Indonesia? Yeah, we want to have like similar project like in Turkey, but there is I see that there's a lot of things that need to be addressed. So can you share the challenges that you face to give like financing and also guarantees for the project in Indonesia?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges that we have is that in Jakarta, obviously, we're dealing with BUMD rather than BUMN. So both Jakarta MRT and Transjakarta are under DKI Jakarta. And I don't think we've got the framework yet for them to benefit from Ministry of Finance or IIGF guarantees. So I think it does require some assistance from central government through Ministry of Transportation, through the MOF as well, and Bappenas, to put that kind of framework into place. And one idea is that maybe the BUMD can actually form a joint venture with BUMN or other private sector companies in order to get that treatment. So I think there's some homework still to be done in terms of coming up with this framework, because at the moment there is a bit of a mismatch, because it's easy for us to do financing at the national level for national projects through the Ministry of Finance. We do a lot of business with them at the moment. But when it comes to regional and municipal projects, then I think it becomes quite tricky.
Yeah, I think it's going to be similar question for David. So I know that now there's a lot of MDBs interested to give financial support to Indonesia and cities as well in Indonesia. Like there is a project, BRT project in Bandung and also in Medan and others. What is the main challenges faced by the banks in carry out the project finance, mainly in Indonesia cities?
I don't think ADB's, to be very honestly, is facing any challenges. I think ADB has the ability to support many projects in Indonesia. In fact, we've been wanting to support more projects. I think it's just a matter of the right opportunities to come across. For example, back in 2017, 2018, we invested or lent more than $1 billion into the energy sector because the IPP sector was very strong. Now that the IPP sector is kind of weaker, we are looking to divert our funds into other sectors to be more active, such as urban transport, water, telecommunications. So I think my manager is telling me do as much as possible, right? So it's really for us to work with the government, whether it's through our sovereign team, private sector, to see how we can get more projects bankable, because it's not just ADB. A lot of other commercial banks see Indonesia as a very important part of their portfolio. So we look forward to working with the right ministries to open up opportunities.
Sure. And next question is for Gary. So you've shared about several projects, like successful project in a lot of countries. Do you have like experience in failure project that maybe you can share with us? And then what is the lesson then that you can share with us, that it's like a takeaways that we, all of us here, can learn from that?
Yeah, well, look, we have been involved in a lot of successful projects, which is great. But I guess, the biggest single problem with major infrastructure programs is always delay and overspend. And, that's not unique to the ASEAN region or anywhere else. Even in well-developed regions, in countries like Australia, who have a great track record in delivering large PPP projects, they can still get into trouble. There's some toll road projects recently that, of course, most people know about. And I guess, if you're talking about specifically PPP projects, then when you're looking at those demand revenue return projects, which is based on, payment of toll roads or whatever it may be, they can be very tricky indeed. But the reality is the reason projects are a success or a failure is based on the level of strategic review and rigor that's prepared right at the start of that project. And I think what we're finding is on more mega projects, our clients, people like ED&A, for example, in Australia, where we're acting as the integrator, that extra input, that extra value of the consultant being in that integrator role very, very early on, ultimately brings the strategic value and knowledge to the project so you can realize the benefits and mitigate those risks.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to open for questions from the audience. If there are any, you can raise your hand. If not, I can continue my question to Pak Oni, of course. So, yeah, Pak Oni, again, like growth. We know that in the past years, there is always growth. But how Bank Indonesia keep this performance? Like, we understand that now Bank Indonesia has succeeded in holding the inflation rate under 5%. And does Bank Indonesia have also a strategy to keep accelerating infrastructure development in the future? So what kind of strategy that now in the pipeline of Bank Indonesia to keep this good performance?
Yeah, I think this time is very challenging time, not only for the Bank Indonesia, but also global. The global, including Indonesia, now are facing, the food crisis, commodity crisis, and we know also the advanced country, like US, UK, they are trying to fight the inflation. And today we are live in the time of the tightening time. And Indonesia is trying to keep on doing, becoming the competitive country in terms of the investor or the international. We are trying to create the confidence by performing the stability of the country. For example, the growth of Indonesia and primarily Jakarta is still growing compared to any other country. Our growth today is Indonesia is 5.44%, and the inflation is still under 5. We know in any other country, advanced country, the inflation rate is so high. And maybe you will be surprised if you look at the Venezuela, the inflation rate is more than 100% inflation rate. And we are still keep doing and collaborate with the government. For example, we have two strategies how to address the stagflation issues, the inflation rate and the low growth. So Bank Indonesia keep on doing in the monetary policy. We monitor price of food. We monitor the growth of the core inflation. So last month we increased our interest rate to address that. And the second, the government and fiscal side also trying to keep on performing in the stability and growth. For example, if you can read from the newspaper, maybe just 2 days ago, government is to decide to increase the subsidies to fight with the energy crisis. And we are still monitor what going to happen in this week, the announcement of the government, and next week, but we are still consistent to maintain our defense in terms of facing the inflation rate and the exchange rate, for example. So I think that is the effort of the Bank Indonesia to keep maintaining the stability, collaborating with the government, also collaborating with any other central banks. For example, to reduce the pressure of United States dollars, US dollars, we are trying to building the ecosystem of local currency settlement to reduce the dependency in the dollars. Still in struggling and fighting and try expanding this kind of transaction. And I think if we succeed in the future, we can release from the dependency of one or two global currency that will impact us. And today also you can see 2 years ago, the issue of our national balance, international balance sheet is the deficit. But during pandemic, reversely, surplus. We have surplus. And that is also opportunity to absorb the risk of the externality, the risk of the inflation, and the risk of the rise of capital outflow. So I think we cannot face the situation by only the central bank. We need the collaboration with government, with the external, with the stakeholders, with the regional government to push how to deal with the volatile food first. And I think a month ago, government and Bank Indonesia already announced to the public, we have the movement to fight the volatile food. So for example, to prevent the increased price of what we call cabai, sili. Sili in Indonesia is, like this, the price. And the rice and any food and commodity. I think that is the example what we have done until now.
Yeah, so several attempts has been done by Bank Indonesia to maintain the stability. Maybe I'll come back to Richard. So we know that interest rate for the mainly for the private sector and the government as well to finance the project is very important. My question is, are there any cases in the UK that the commercial bank could provide lower interest rate for the infrastructure project? Yeah, and then are there any also incentive from the UK government to reduce the infrastructure project costs?
Okay, so on the first question, the fact that you actually have a UK government guarantee from UK Export Finance in favor of the commercial bank means that they are transferring their risk from the project or from the government they're dealing with overseas to the UK government. And currently that's a AA risk. So we find that commercial banks do take account of that, and that the interest rate that they charge when they're lending with our guarantee is very competitive. So that's obviously the best way to reduce the interest rate. And of course, I would say that myself. But I think the best way to get the lowest interest rate is obviously to de-risk the project as far as possible, because banks will charge interest based on the risk that they take on. So the more risk that is pushed to the private sector or to the banks, the higher the interest rate they're going to have to charge. So that's why in these large-scale infrastructure projects, often the best value for money is when the government is giving a sovereign guarantee for the project, which of course does put some risk on the taxpayers ultimately, but it does deliver a project more quickly and at more competitive rates. And of course, using multilaterals like my friend ADB on the panel today, that can also help to bring down the overall cost of financing. And then on the second part, in terms of incentives, the UK government actually more broadly, not just UK Export Finance, does have quite a lot of programs to support infrastructure development, and they've done a lot of work already in Indonesia. More recently, they've supported, for example, urban transit in Bandung. And they're also supporting the financing structure for Jakarta at the moment as well. So this is in addition to what we as UK Export Finance can provide. So you can view it as being one package overall, even though they're not actually tied together. So I think that's another example of how we can provide incentives.
Yeah. Is that, yeah, okay, questions from the audience? Maybe you can say your name and then from your what institution, and then your question will be addressed to which panelist.
Okay, thank you. My name is actually Yogi Rifano. I'm from Transjakarta. So this question is actually to Pak Wani. At the moment, Transjakarta is actually exploring about partnership or getting investment from overseas, you know, for the green initiative, either EV or also the TOD. But the problem that we have right now, we've been talking also with ADB and also with UKF, you know, the problem we have, if there is, we still hard to find a mechanism, you know, regulation, also the framework, so to have the partnership and then the investment, you know, with the state-owned company. Because when we talk to the MOF, Ministry of Finance, they said they can only guarantee public company, you know, public government company, but not state-owned company. So until now, we're still trying to find how to conduct this initiative. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for the question, but the substance is not my expert, but I'm trying to answer. I am interested with what Gary present in the scheme, the sum scheme presented on the previous presentation by Gary. I think the triple P and the structure of the finance is very important, how to attract the investor come in. And yes, right, we need to find the domestic partner or government partner to participate in the project, to build the confidence to the foreign partners. And in the point of view of the Bank Indonesia, we believe PPP, but PPP is not really easy to implement. For example, for the BUMD, what we call regional state ownership, yeah. But for the BUMN or SEO is it's not as difficult for the regional. And the issues for the regional, we know the government already launched the regulation how to issue the regional bond. But in the regional bond, we have the constraint because the time frame is only 5 years. But the project is longer than the required. So, sorry, I cannot answer clearly, and that is a homework. So that's why we invite the expert here, and we take a note. For example, I am interested in the Kerry presentation that many scheme and structure of finance that not only a single creditors. We need many investors, but we have to learn how to have that capacity. You know, like Howard also, we need the capacity building. Still many homework for attracting the investor in Indonesia. I am part of the investment committee with Pak Tom Lembong, is trying to find how to draft the perspective and how to, how to become the investment banker as if investment banker. So we can offer the perspective, the project with the structure of finance and help the investor understand to evaluate this. So I think the answer is the capacity building among all of us. And that
maybe my question is, if the mechanism is not in place yet, is it possible, like in the future, if like Transjakarta or others, maybe like UKEF or ADB, form a mechanisms and then give suggestion to the government, is that possible? Like then become a regulation to make that investment like ongoing?
Yeah, I think like Bank Indonesia and government is trying to find the innovative, the structure financing for the investment until today. Until today, we need still the knowledge and skill how to restructure the finance of the investment. I think it's possible, but I know more possible if we have the knowledge and the skill of doing that. So I think the many respective stakeholder, government, regional government, central banks, and the state-owned enterprise or regional-owned enterprise sit together and trying to absorb the new skill and capacity. And I believe if we understand, I think we can adjust our regulation in the future.
Thank you, Pak. I will ask next panelists, maybe because of the time constraint. So for David, I want to ask about blended finance. So this is one of strategy for allocating the sustainable fund into infrastructure development. So how far could the government of Indonesia attach the sustainable fund from ADB perspective? And then are they on the right track currently? Or is there any suggestions to improve it from the ADB's perspective?
Could you rephrase the question?
Yeah,
again,
so
please?
the blended finance is one strategy for allocating the sustainable fund into infrastructure development. So how far could the government of Indonesia attach to the sustainable fund from the ADB perspective?
I think one of the mechanisms that the government is supporting is through ENA, right? So ENA is a fund that is a $1 billion fund that is actually investing a lot into renewable energy and other infrastructure. So that's one step. I think they're going to try and be like Temasek in Singapore to do that. So they're doing everything they can to invest in infrastructure. I think I read here that the private sector, including ADB private sector and the commercial banks all over Asia, are ready to invest in this country. It's just basically getting the right projects bankable, getting the right risk profile in order for those investments to come in.
Okay. The last questions, maybe I can ask Gary. I know that McDonald is international company with having international experience as well, and they also have like representative office in its countries, including in Indonesia. So how far does McDonald attract the local company to participate or collaborate in the infrastructure project?
Okay, excellent question. So I guess the start is we're open, absolutely open to partnering with local companies. But it's easy to say that, and so maybe I'll give you a couple of examples of projects around the world, and I'll come back to Indonesia. JFK undertaking a transformational program, I think $18 billion program to change JFK, and were the strategic planner and master planner on that project, and also the integrator directly embedded inside the Port Authority's team. Together with the Port Authority, we have managed to employ, I think, about 30% of the value in local, minority, and even women-owned businesses, which is about $5 billion worth of work that's going to go into those very local companies. In Sydney, on the ED&S program, we're managing something like 59 suppliers and engage them in contracts. 38 or 39 of those are SMEs. So it's part of it's completely inherent and part of the process. And I think it's what I spoke about before in terms of capacity building. We work with a numerous number of partners here in Singapore, both government agencies and SMEs and local consultants. It's the best way. You have to leverage the best talent, and you have to help build that capacity in the local market for everybody's long-term success.
Okay. Do we have any questions from the audience? I think if we don't have any question, I think we come to the end. Thank you all for the panelists to share their experience and expertise. That's really excellent. I hope that the audience here have benefits of from these sharing sessions with all of the panelists. We appreciate for you taking time off your schedule to join us today. And for the next, I think we'll have another video as a remark of the end of Jakarta Investment Forum. But before that, before we end of these sessions, please give a big round of applause to all of the panelists here. Thank you. Oh, okay. So before all of the panelists leaving the stage, we have photo sessions. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. That's the end of our funding infrastructure with British Embassy session. After this, we are going to watch together a closing video for Jakarta Investment Forum 2022, but we're gonna watch it relay after the session at the main ballroom is finished. Thank you very much.